Hey folks, I'm gonna do some planting of herbs and fruits in containers. So if you don't have a lot of space and you'd like to actually grow some edible fruits and herbs because maybe you like to cook, maybe you just like the novelty of it, there's quite a few that you could do in small containers. Now I have this back patio here, which is great because I used to always grow herbs indoors in a south and also a northeast facing window, believe it or not, in Brooklyn, and was fairly successful, especially, I loved basil, thyme. Rosemary was a little difficult. You'd have to really get some sun for that. But if you have a fire escape, which I did, and the only challenge with that is I fed the birds, so oftentimes the birds would use the vegetables that I would plant out there as a place where they would sleep or defecate, so that's not ideal. But if you have like a fire escape or a small patio, there's plenty of herbs and plants that you could plant in order to have something to cook up. So I already have some things that I started out here. You could see the challenges that I get out here if they don't have a cloche over is that I have some parsley, which has been dug up a little bit here because the chipmunks like to come in and bury some seeds. And then I also have cilantro as well, so cilantro and parsley, which is good because I love fresh cilantro and parsley. If I'm doing rice and beans, the cilantro is perfect. Parsley is really good if you're just, in general, if you're making like a soup or even including some of the leaves in a salad. I have some beautiful lavender over here, which is great for scent. Now, oftentimes they'll sell lavender for the home. I find lavender to be really challenging. Both lavender and rosemary is very challenging indoors unless you have some of those really bright conditions. It also doesn't like to get too wet. So if you're somebody who likes to water your plants, then this one is more of a dry plant. And many of the herbs that I'm going to be showing you are more like Mediterranean herbs, so they like to be on the drier side. This is quite possibly some of my favorite scents together. Now, this is not something that I would use as an herb to eat, but this I found out is an artemisia. It's an annual like many of these plants. The lavender is actually hardy to this area. But this is an artemisia and it's called Essence of Ethiopia. Or maybe it's Perfume de Ethiopia. I'll have to get you the exact name. It is one of the best scents, but together with the lavender, it's so delicious. And I think I have this spot right here, and I'm gonna plant a little bit of Tulsi basil, which does get to be quite bushy, but I think it's gonna be enough space and I could always cut it down because many of the plants in the Lamiaceae family, which is the mint family, do very well with cutting. But it's challenging if you ever plant them out in an environment because they spread. So if I have the Tulsi basil, which smells almost like bubble gum, it's like bubblegum basil, this and this together, I think that is going to be like my favorite scent spot here. Now what I'm gonna do today is plant up some more kind of Mediterranean style herbs. And again, these are ones that I use on the regular. So I have oregano. And I should say that there are certain varieties of oregano that grow very short. But again, these are plants that do well by cutting back. So this is just standard Italian oregano. I picked this up at a local farm. And then these are beautiful thyme. You can see how thyme just kind of carpets. There's great cultivated varieties that you could plant between pavers that don't quite have a scent or they're not used in culinary purposes. So not all thyme smells. This one does, it's an English thyme, and you can see how it drapes over. It's just beautiful carpet forming. It should be flowering soon, so it's like end of May when I'm filming this, and usually in end of May, June, it starts to flower. This is another great herb. I don't use it as regularly. This is actually growing in the landscape out here, but it has a beautiful purple flower. You could start to see it forming here, but it gets to be like almost like a ball on top, which is so cute. This is chives. It's an allium. You could smell it that it's an allium because it has that kind of pungent, sulfury smell. And this one I would like to grow in with this because I think this would be, oregano usually gets to be like a little purple flower. So does the thyme. It's a kind of like a little pinkish purple flower. And I think that will also look nice because even though I'm gonna be cutting on these containers, I want them to look nice as well. and inviting. And thyme, out of all these, thyme is probably the one that I use the most. So I put it in soups and stews. If I'm seasoning meats or anything like that, I'll put thyme in. If I have some pasta and whatnot, then I'll use that as well. Chives, it is, if I have something that needs to be like a green onion in a recipe, or if you're somebody who eats like tuna fish or something, oftentimes people will put chives in there. I haven't eaten tuna fish in a very, very long time. The next thing I'm gonna do is plant this strawberry pot up. This is a really massive pot. I have some that are quite a bit smaller, and strawberries are, in general, rhizomatous. So you'll see that these strawberries, I went up and got some of these from one of the Amish farms up here. This is called Honeyoy, and this is an Everberry or Everlast, and they have really beautiful flowers as well. So typically, strawberry flowers are whites. I have some that are nice bright pink as well. So many different varieties. You could also get strawberries that are bare root. In fact, I might have planted some around here if they haven't been dug up yet. Yeah, so this is like a bare root strawberry. So I'll show you, this is what a bare root would look like. Now, these get dug up a little bit here, unfortunately, so I have to be very mindful because our chipmunks like to bury seeds and peanuts in here. The other thing you could do is, because strawberries spread by stolons, so stolons are basically above ground stems. So if you think of maybe a spider plant, which is an indoor plant, you have those stolons that stick out and then you have the little baby spiders that hang off. This is similar, and they just kind of spread and spread and spread. So if you have them on kind of bare ground, it forms a ground cover. Not all strawberries do that. Our native strawberries and a lot of our strawberries that have been bred for eating do that. However, you could get strawberries like this one. This is called Fragaria vesca. I think the cultivar name is Red Wonder, and it grows as a clump. So this does not spread. So if you're somebody short on space and you don't want a rhizomatous strawberry, because it would be quite laborious having to cut off all of the different stolons because they really do spread, which is great if you want to just start with a few strawberry plants as well. But if you want something that is a bit more clump forming, then I would say for Fragaria vesca, and they have perfectly fine fruit. I'm also going to go over some other varieties of fruits and vegetables that you could plant that are perfect for containers. I'm going to add quite a bit of perlite, as you can see, because it is going to have some rain, and I want it to drain, because these will rot if you give it too much water. And you have to be cautious of like whether it's going to be a dry year or it's going to be a wet year, because if it's too dry, your plants may also dry out, so you might want to add a little less perlite. In this case, we've had so much rain. We have 13 inches of rain more than what we would get on average. We've already gotten half the amount of rain this year that we would typically get for the full year. So it has been extremely wet. All right, so I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to start to place these around, knowing that they will spread some. So again, this is the chives. Really good root growth. You want to leave a little space at the top as well. That is where you're going to water things in. And honestly, the less area that we showcase around where chippies could dig in, chipmunks, the better. I wanted it like an instant display because, like I said, this is multi-purpose. It's to cut on it and to also display it. I have this in the back because it's kind of like the one with the height. And then I have little 4 oreganos, and you could start this by seed as well. I don't always do that because I don't always have an adequate place to start the seed. But I always find this to be really empowering. You might not be able to grow all your fruits and vegetables, especially in a small setting, if you only have like a little fire escape or your windowsill, but you can at least grow some herbs. And the good thing about strawberries too is that strawberries tend to grow in all sorts of lighting conditions. However, if you want to get the best fruit set, you need to give them some sun as well. And when I say a sunny windowsill, sunny windowsills are usually not as sunny as planting them outdoors, because you think our windows might be a little dirty. You know, in some cases, especially in a lot of the high rises, I know they'll have windows that are tinted. Now, I think another one that I would like to cook with personally is basil, and I have that now planted primarily in the landscape, but you could do basil in a container. Rosemary would be fine, although you need to give rosemary a big enough container unless you're getting a really small plant, because they tend to grow a bit more behemoth. I don't think I've ever seen any type of micro rosemary, because I've seen oregano that maybe only grows up to 6 inches. Thyme obviously naturally grows a bit more like a carpet. There's some that grow a little bit taller. Now, do you need to fertilize this for the remainder of the year? I don't, honestly. My herbs, not really. I mean, unless you see that they're turning yellow or they look, you know, like they need a little bit more nitrogen, you could probably give them a nice balanced fertilizer. Oftentimes the herbs are not as tasty or are not as flavorful if you do let them flower. So if you don't mind them flowering and you think that's pretty, then let them flower. But if you want to go for maximum taste, then do yourself a favor and clip off some of those flowers, or clip them before they start to flower. And the reason for that is that these herbs are, think about it, they start to put energy into their flowers versus their roots, their shoots, or their leaves. So their flowers are saying, hey, pollinate me, to whomever is going to pollinate them. And so that's where the flavor is going to go. That's where all the sugars are going to go. That's where the nectar is going to put its energy. That's for the pollinators. But then again, sometimes you could eat the flowers of these plants as well. So basil flowers are edible. All right, that's that one. It's looking really good. Now, we're going to get started on this massive strawberry planter. And I actually need something. I should have a little piece of netting down here, but instead I'm going to use some stone, because you can see this hole down here, even though it has some seeds and bird poop. It's quite large, which is a great thing. But if I don't put a stone down here, I'm going to lose all my soil. And strawberries like to be a little less dry. And you see this terracotta pot. It's going to suck some of that water out unless you soak your terracotta. So I'm going to use some regular potting medium, a little less perlite. So that's a bunch of the soil in here. Comes right out. I mean, it's almost like an instant display. It's kind of cheating, but like I said, you could go with some of those bare root ones. If you plant a stoloniferous strawberry on the top of the planter, then you could take the offset stolons and place them into the holes on the sides of the strawberry pot, which is what it's naturally designed for. However, if you want an instant display, you could do what I'm doing, which is adding smaller strawberry plants to each hole around the planter. See, it looks better on my side here. That looks like the front. You don't want any gap, so I might have to put some more soil. But you see how this soil is in here? Well, that's perfect, because then your strawberries could stick in here, just like this. So I gotta see if I could break some of the soil away. And I'll probably come in here with some more wet soil and fill it in so that none of those roots are sticking out. So our native strawberries grow pretty much anywhere here. If you have bare ground and in light shade, dappled shade, full shade, and sun, they will form a carpet, which is really wonderful. Now, we should be expecting strawberries in, I would say, in less than a month. Now I'm going to use some of this potting medium that we had. I'm gonna open up another bag because this potting medium is actually a little moist, which is great because I think it'll stick better. See that? So you might want to moisten your potting medium just a little bit in this case. Now you saw this was displayed in a hanging basket, and that is totally normal to do as well. Now here's an example of some of the stolons. So that is the stems, so basically above ground stems that will start to root up. So it'll start to root up right around here if you give it some more potting medium. You could also cut those off and then pot them around elsewhere, which is super cool. Now, if you want to focus on fruits in the first year, then oftentimes folks will, or fruits on the second year, then folks will often cut the flowers off in the first year, just so it focuses on spreading more so that you have more fruits in the second year. But I would say that if you're growing in a container, especially a small container, you're not gonna worry about that because they have nowhere to spread. So one thing I would note is that sometimes you will see some die off with the lower leaves, especially if they're not getting enough sunlight. So come out here and just clip those off. So that would be a way to go with that. There are plenty of fruit bushes that have been bred for container planting, including blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. I'm planting both Vaccinium Silver Dollar, which has a nice bluish tinge to the upper portion of the leaf, and then silvery white on the underside, making it pretty even when it's not bearing fruit, as well as a Scarlet Ovation Huckleberry, which is a naturally dwarfing selection which has bronzy red new growth and stays to around 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. Now, both like a moist but well-draining soil or substrate mix, and Vaccinium also tends to like more acidic conditions, so be sure to add some soil acidifier and top dress with a nice bark or pine needle mulch to help keep moisture in the soil. Let me show you what I have here. I don't have everything, but I'll show you some of my ideas. Now, if you're going to go with a bean, you can actually grow beans easily in a container, particularly if they're bush beans. Now, if you have a trellis like I have here, then you can actually grow some twining beans up the trellis. Right now we have like a rose and some clematis and some honeysuckle, but bush beans grow bushier. So they just bush out and they produce your beans. So I have dragon tongue and red swan bush beans, and they will normally say whether they are bush type or vining type. And sometimes there's types that are kind of in between, so you just want to look into that. And if you want to plant them, which I've planted some of these in the landscape, usually soak the beans first. It's better to do that. Carrots I've always found challenging out here in this environment, but you may not find them as challenging, so I'm going to bring them up because they need really light, fluffy soil and they need to be undisturbed. The reason why it's challenging out here is I have lots of little animals that like to dig in the pots, but I'm going to show you this carrot, and this you can see they're like little round nubs. They're very easy to eat, but again, light, fluffy soil. They do best in the cool season, so sometimes there's carrots that if you plant, they are better towards the summer months. These are better in the cool season. Radishes, I find, are very easy to start. You could do radishes as microgreens along with beet microgreens. In fact, microgreens is something that I started in my apartment in Brooklyn with some overhead LED lights. It does attract quite a bit of fungus gnats, however, because you want to keep the soil kind of moist, and fungus gnats tend to really like that. But microgreens, you're basically cutting them every 7 to 10 days. And radishes, even though they're a root crop, they don't grow that far down. You have some radishes that do grow far down, but if you have a deep enough container, then you could probably grow radishes. Next one on my list is peas. This is again, bush type of pea. It doesn't trellis. And this is called peas Tom Thumb. And there is a series of both peas as well as tomatoes that are very small. Tom Thumb grows, I can't imagine, I don't think it grows anything more than 10 inches. It doesn't say on here, but it's a very small plant, and you could get a pretty decent number of peas. I mean, maybe, okay, you're not gonna grow like a whole, peas to saute in a vegetable dish for 10 people, but it is, kind of a novelty if you're growing in a very small space. There's also a related tomato, as I had mentioned, and I believe it's called Micro Tom. Now, when you're looking at tomatoes, you have indeterminate tomatoes and then you have determinate tomatoes. Indeterminate tomatoes means that it has indeterminate growth. It can continue to grow and grow, so it's usually a tall, lanky tomato, and it will push out fruit all year. So until it can no longer push out fruit because it's frosted or something. So they're annual around here. And typically you wouldn't want to try to grow a tomato indoors. You could try, but I don't know if the fruit growth would be really that great. So, because they need a lot of sun and they need a lot of water as well. Whenever I think of a lot of water indoors, I think of like fungus gnats, which, as I found out when I was pooling the audience on Plant One On Me, for instance, fungus gnats was the #1 pest that people made mention of. So when you're growing something like maybe your thyme or your oregano or your basil, or even if you're rosemary, if you're trying to push it indoors, you're not really watering those very much. So you're not going to be attracting fungus gnats, I think, as much as if you were growing something that needs a lot of water and a lot of sun. So the microtoms are determinate. That means that they grow to a set height. In the case of microtoms, they don't grow more than 8 inches. And they flush out a set of fruit. And once they set out that fruit, they're done. It kind of basically dies back. So you have to look into determinate and indeterminate. The microtom, for me, I haven't done extensive research, but I think that's one of the smallest tomatoes. But you definitely want to look into determinate varieties if you're growing that in a container outdoors. So like I said, I actually planted some of these Tom Thumb peas, some dragon tongue. I'll probably end up doing some red swan bush peas out here. And I don't think I'm going to attempt the carrots unless I could maybe get a cloche over the top of them, sort of similar to this, what I have here. So this is what I mean by a cloche. Not one that's glass, because then the glass is going to reflect all the light and probably kill the plants. The glass cloches are great indoors, like if you're growing like a moss, or if you don't have like direct light on it, because it could get really hot, turn into a greenhouse condition. Sometimes those glass cloches are good if you're trying to revive a plant, but you also need some airflow as well. So that's some examples of what we're doing out here in containers. Great ideas for just small spaces, which, some of us don't have the opportunity to plant in larger spaces. I planted this way for decades because I just never had enough space. But out here on this patio, I felt like it was right because, hey, we could come out here and just like do some clipping, as opposed to having to walk 500 or 100 feet over to the garden or whatever it is. You could just quickly come out here, clip something if you need it, and it's no big deal. We have some kale as well, I should say. Kale gets quite large, but I also find it to be very ornamental. But if you need a few kale leaves, that might be something that you want to do too. And also, I should say, the nasturtiums. This is a beautiful trailing plant, needs a lot of sun, but these have peppery leaves. And if you go over here, this is in full flower, and this is a variegated version right here. And you could also eat the flowers, believe it or not. Great pollinator plant as well, but flowers in the salad, absolutely marvelous. Peppery green leaves, you could add that to the salad as well. I wouldn't have that as a full salad, but I guess you could do anything. It's edible. But yeah, those are some of my ideas, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. We're doing group botanical tours later this year and next to Costa Rica and Thailand. Now, even though the trips are sold out, if you'd like to go, be sure to sign up to the wait list, because we may be able to do an additional trip for those interested. Go to homesteadbrooklyn.com, click the Learn tab, and head over to Botanical Tours for more information or find the link below in the description. And if it's something that you'd like to do in the future, be sure to sign up anyway so you know when next trips launch. We'll see you in the next video or on one of the tours.